on cybersecurity in the digital era. I'm Rahima Wasti, Marketing Executive at Line for Dev, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. Joining me is our esteemed founder, Mr. Philip Cutting, who will share his invaluable insights on this critical topic. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you, Rahima. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope they're invaluable.
And with the rise of remote work, what specific cybersecurity measures should companies implement for their remote teams?
Okay, terrific. This is this is one of those things that you want to implement as you evolve, right?
Mhm.
So my best advice is if you don't actually do a whole 27001 um ISO certification, go through the process of it, right? And
Right.
this process is going to help you identify threats and help
Mhm.
you create a documentation and processes on how to handle threats when they do happen, right? It's a really a great process, and I encourage it for a lot of people. It can be a little pricey if you have somebody do it professionally, if you go through the certification and the actual monitoring of it, but you're going to start off with VPN access. You're going to consider how data for employees is provided and how they get authentication keys. For us, right? We will often have to ask for certain credentials from our users. We ask that they
Mhm.
change the
Right.
password for that, and we monitor that, and then we go and when we release that information, we're like, we're done at this point. Please change your passwords. Please remove our access to this. Please make sure it's secure and solid, and
Mhm.
everything we can to protect them, right? So once we ask you to do that, right?
Yeah.
If you're working with other agencies and they ask you for this access, first of all, you should be comfortable saying, hey, why do you need that, right? And they should have an answer for that. And this is not being paranoid, and you shouldn't feel bad about that. Go ahead and ask, right? They should have a good answer. And then ask, how long do you need that access, and how quickly can I get it back, right? This is fairly critical, and you should avoid giving out credentials as much as possible. But we understand there's times you have to do that, especially when you're a startup and so on, right? But take your time to make sure you're comfortable and understand what's out there and what's not. There's also ways to do your two-factor authentication, right? This should be
Yeah.
enabled on all your services, even if you're this situation where I just described where you're sharing credentials, right? You should have 2FA enabled, two-factor authentication, so that you're enabling access as it's required. And the next thing I would look at is making sure that you're physically securing your devices. There's software out there that you can install, and if somebody steals your computer or device, it can has certain procedures to lock it out.
Right.
I have a friend that I should really bring on the call to talk about
Mhm.
how to secure your systems, how to do these 27001 ISO certifications, so that people can kind of dive deeper into that. But
We will look into that.
this is at the business's individual layers, right?
Yeah.
With the access with the employees and with vendors and so on. When there's a lot of stuff that happens in the back end, right, from your developer side, implement a fairly large complex system of standards and
Right.
technologies to help secure a lot of stuff. But if you're going out and you're recklessly, like in an airport or a coffee shop, accessing the internet, logging into sensitive information, it's easy for people to steal that information. VPNs are one of the first things I mentioned and help protect against that. So don't be
Exactly.
afraid. Yeah, it may give you a little less performance, but take that performance loss, because once you have that security hit, you will understand what a new expense is.
That is absolutely right. At Line for Dev, we've also found that regular check-ins and cybersecurity drills help keep our remote team vigilant and prepared. It's crucial to create a culture of security awareness, even when working from home. Now, let's get to the question that is, how can you discuss the importance of regularity, compliance, and adhering to cybersecurity standards?
Oh, so good question, right? So a lot of compliance is forced upon us, right?
Yeah.
So compliance regulations like GDPR or CCPA are critical for legal and ethical reasons, right? And adhering to established cybersecurity standards,
Mm-hmm.
just like I mentioned, is ISO 20001, right? Ensures
Right.
helping make sure a company's security practices are robust and up to date. For example, GDPR requires that companies protect the personal data of e-users, and non-compliance can result in significantly hefty fines very rapidly, right? So at LineProDev, we adhere to those regulations and standards to ensure that our clients' data is protected and builds trust with our users. And part of this requires that we take the minimal information or that we take get information as it's required. There's other things, simple, like there's simple things, right? Like making sure that our apps are obfuscated, that we are using security keys in a way that we separate them from the app and we protect them, and that we are doing um, certificate management. These are the standard things, right? There's levels
Exactly.
above it, but you want to make sure that you have a basis, and this basis should be your standard operating procedures. If you're dealing with another company agency, just
Mhm.
ask them what that is and have them describe it to you. Throw some of these
Mhm.
questions that we talked about at them and see if they're fitting on that. And don't, like, understand that there's different stages where you integrate different technologies, right?
Definitely,
Maybe you
yes.
don't need to incur the cost
Uh-huh.
of some of these standards because you're only dealing in like your local state, for example, right? Maybe you need to, and maybe you need to take it to the next level because you should be looking at HIPAA certificates, right? Just take a look at it, see what you need to do, and be reasonable because there's trade-offs to costs when you're trying to decide um, how protected your data should be. Right now, if you're just getting a person's nickname, if you're getting their course location, right, and you have a flashlight tool, you shouldn't be going crazy, right? But
Exactly.
once you start collecting sensitive information, that's when you
Mhm.
really need to be considerate. And maybe you look at it and say, hey, do I really need this information in the first place? Right? Do I need to take the risk of managing this information? Can it hurt my users if I do, or is it going to be helpful?
Yeah. So, regulatory compliance not only protects our data but also builds trust with our clients and stakeholders. At LineProDev, we've committed to maintaining the highest standards of cybersecurity to safeguard our clients' information and comply with all relevant regulations. Moving on to the next question, what steps should businesses take to prepare for and respond to cyber incidents?
Okay, great. So every business should have an incidents response plan in place,
Exactly.
right? These are standard
Mhm.
operating procedures that everybody should understand ahead of time. Now, the client may not understand a lot of these or even think about this, but the agency that is managing your app, creating your app, or the agency that is ensuring that they have a service plan with you that makes sure that your app is up and consistently protected, right?
Yeah.
They should be doing this for you. If you have an internal team, yeah, then
Mhm.
to have those procedures, you need to be doing drills and practice, making sure that you are able to handle a situation if it occurs, right? So regularly testing this plan through simulations is essential. And
Mhm.
here at Lion, right, what we do is we conduct regular drills. We call this our DevOps process, right? And
Right.
we introduce chaos so
Exactly.
that we know what's going to happen and how to execute this. Now, we do this differently for each of our contracts of our clients because they require different levels of this, right? It
Absolutely, yeah.
does add a layer of expense, but again, like I said, once you're out there in the public, once you have a large user base, right? I don't mean like a mass, like millions of users, right? Once you have hundreds and thousands of users, then you need to start thinking about, hey, how do I handle this situations, right? What kind of blowback
Exactly.
is there going to be? Am I a mature product at this point? Do people expect that I have this level of preparedness, or am I just starting up? And people realize that I'm just trying to get my feet under me, right? You got to understand where you're at before you're incurring certain expenses. We carry a lot on our own just to, because we have a reputation to maintain also, right? And whoever you're hiring to do the work for you, ask them, what's their
Mhm.
basis, right? What have they been hacked? Look in the news to see if they've been hacked, right? And have them explain, what's the process that happens if it does that. What's the cost of taking it to the next level? What is the next level, right? We always like to give this roadmap of, okay, you're here, and we, based off your current position, we recommend this level of diligence. And
Exactly.
as you grow, we think that it should be this kind of velocity where you have this kind of current risk and you're able to scale up to this risk, and here's a plan, know what to expect, right? I think it's healthy to have that plan ahead in those discussions. If you're not having those discussions with your team, they're probably a bit of either a discount agency, or they're not experienced enough to walk you through those
Exactly.
situations if they happen.
Definitely, and preparation is the absolute key. Now, moving on to the other segment where we get the questions from our audience. First one is Phil. You mentioned phishing attacks. I received an email asking for my bank details. How can I identify and avoid such scams?
Banks won't ask for this. First of all, banks won't ask, right?
Yeah.
If you get an email from a company that's asking for your banking information, you should immediately feel like these are red flags, right? You should be calling up that company directly to a known number, right?
Mhm.
And it should be a number on your statement, right? Not a number on their website, because their website might have been hacked, right? But definitely not a number in that email. Don't call that number in that email, right? So uh, it's so easy to copy bank statements and to copy all this stuff and to deliver it there. So make sure you're looking at historical information. Look at the sender, right? Open up the details of that email and look at what the sender is to see if there's something that doesn't look right. That's one of the easiest giveaways, because most people won't do that man in the middle where they take over the end side also, right? They'll just send it from their own email. They'll put the label there, which is what most people look like, and say, yeah, Chase Bank. It looks all official, but when you look down at it, it'll say Chase Bank, Citibank, some numbers and a bunch of letters, and then .com, right? And you're like, it should be support dot you should be, so for example, it should be support or project, or Jane at support.chase.com. It should not be um Jane at chase bank.com dot 12345xyz.com, right? Those are
Exactly.
obvious things, right?
Yeah.
But just when you get a weird email like that, ignore it. Call your bank, call your provider, right? If it's a
Mhm.
smaller agency, they don't have tech support, and they're asking for this information over on the line, do two things: ignore it, right? That's my first reference, or
Or
consider working with another provider, because they shouldn't be asking you this information over the email in the first place, right? If there are times when you have to go in and share your bank information, where you have to connect to your systems, right? So we use, for example, we use Stripe Connect to help connect businesses with a
Mhm.
payment processor, right? It's a huge common one, and you'll see that it's through Stripe, right? It's super obvious, and the developers that make it, they can't hide it because it's a portal between Stripe and their platform. But this is very different than getting a random email that says, hey, send us your banking details because we saw some kind of problem.
Yeah, exactly. That does happen, and this is the correct way to fix it. And the other question is, can you explain why having a complex, unique password for each account is so important? It's a bit overwhelming to manage.
It's hard to manage. I use LastPass, right? There's other password systems out there, right?
Mhm.
What I like about LastPass is I can share email my passwords if I want to. I can use complex passwords for each one. I can monitor where my account's been accessed from, right?
Right.
There's a lot of systems that allow me to protect it, and it's easy to use, and it has tools to help me generate passwords for each account, so I don't have to think. Right, the reason that you want to use complex passwords that don't make sense is there's password hackers out there that are able to generate a massive amount of passwords and to go out there and get your passwords. So if you're using a simple password and on all your systems, and it's going to be the lowest common denominator system out there, like maybe an email or something, is not going to lock you out when they try a lot of attempts. And when they
Right.
hack that, they can then start fanning out to all the other systems, right? And yeah, they may not know that you have a Gmail, right? Or
Right.
specifically, they may not know this, but they're going to run this password through an automated system that checks thousands of websites and see what they can access, right? And it's very common for them to access your banking account information right away based off the information that you provided. More so, it's easy for them to request to change passwords or account accesses and redirect things
Yeah.
once they start getting access to that. So hopefully
Yeah.
that's something that's kind of we ingrain in our users in our community, because it's going to become more and more of a problem, especially if there's a downturn in the economy and people are bored, right? Or where AI has become so efficient that we have a lot of spare time, because these are things that like just kids like to do, right?
Exactly.
I of course never did any malicious hacking as a child, and it wasn't malicious. It was just me playing around. I didn't do that either. So, right. But you know, we know kids, right? They play and they get in trouble. This is innocent, right? There's really bad characters out there. So protect yourselves, guys.
Exactly. With that, we have the other question, which is actually very interesting. With all this talk about data breaches, should I be concerned about the personal photos and information I share on social media?
I think you should. I think you should. And I'm going to step back and preach about something I do preach about sometimes, which is be really careful about the photos that you share of your children, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you share photos of your children, even just between friends or when you store them, say to yourself, would this photo be embarrassing if my son or daughter was doing a presidential campaign? Right. And that's going to help you make that choice. But in general, as far as even just your personal photos and what's out there, I would be very cautious, right? We're long past the day where we kept a lot of information on physical film, right? And it's very easy to take photos. We have a lot of trust, right? And we have a natural inclination to sometimes take photos that we shouldn't of our, of our intimate relationships, and to be more liberal about that, right?
Exactly.
And there's maturity in there, and then there's youthful, just everything we all go through as youth. So I wouldn't, for any photo platform, I wouldn't trust it, right? I would be very conscious of what I have on public storage. I would put my very private stuff on a physical drive that's disconnected. They're cheap enough nowadays. And if it's something you really care about, you get two drives or a mirroring drive. Those are easy enough to get.
Exactly. That answered our question. Philip, this has been incredibly insightful session with you. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or advice for our audience?
Okay, yes, dear. So my key advice is to stay proactive,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and cybersecurity is an ongoing process, right? It's ongoing in our personal lives and in our business. It's a constant growth process, and it's an evolution process. It's not a one size fits all. It's what's really that makes the most sense for me based off of my security requirements, my clients' needs, and where I'm at in our business's evolution, right? So what you really have to do is stay focused on being vigilant against the risks that are out there. Make sure that you educate your team and that you continuously review your security measures. Make sure that you have alerts set up, and that you are sometimes getting outside advice, especially as you grow. Get secondary advice. If you're hiring me, right, one of the things I'm going to do every once in a while is hire an outside audit from different people. So we're rotating through the experts that I know, And I do it based off of where I think they're the best for the stage, right? If you don't have somebody like me on your team, just get random people or kind of do some research, right? And I don't mean random people because that's right, but random specialists that have a great reputation out there, and have them audit the securities for you. Your agency is going to love you, right? They're not going to have any problems. Most likely, they may find some things, and
Mhm.
they're going to get to bill you a little bit extra to improve the security, so everybody's happy, right? Except for you have to pay for it, but you're going to be happy because you saved yourself a potential embarrassment. And there's no one person out there that can continually stay abreast of what's going on in the world, right? It really takes a community to protect your application and to stay up on this. So don't be shy, right? And agencies also, please go out there. Don't feel like you have to pretend to be the best specialist in security and that you're perfect. Know that you're not. Know that either you've been hacked or you're going to be hacked, and protect your clients.
Absolutely, that is completely correct. Thank you so much, Philip, for sharing your expertise